Hello everyone and welcome to the GRID Engineering GTE Season 1 round 15 and 16 here at the wonderful circuit of Imola. It's going to be a sensational race, even if we do have slightly reduced numbers, it has to be said. There are only 10 drivers that have turned up for the evening, but hopefully they are the creme de la creme, which means we will be able to see some of the fantastic racing that we're used to seeing all throughout this season, still going on here at Imola. We still have championship leaders Matt Hodges and the CXR Project Black crew, including Matt Acton as well, who's here tonight. So there is still a whole host of drivers who hopefully can give us some really entertaining racing. Apparently, last time out at Catalunya was incredibly close for the top couple. I've had a watch of it back. I haven't been able to collate a highlights style video, but that was because, unfortunately, I was just unable to attend last week. It was a last-minute thing. Little bit of personal stuff, so it just meant that it was easier for me to not have to broadcast it. It was just all too much of a rush and I couldn't get the quality that I wanted to put towards it. But we're here back tonight, so apologies for anybody who tuned in trying to find out what happened last week. Unfortunately, we just didn't have a stream. But what we do have is the championship. So as the drivers are out there qualifying at the moment, let's go shoot over and have a look at what happened in the what happened from Catalunya to the championship. As you can see, Matt Hodges taking two 20-point finishes in the sprint and the feature race puts him at 255 points, quite comfortably the championship leader, especially Matt Acton, who looked like he had a bit of a mare of a round, unfortunately, with 188 points, only getting 12 in the previous round. Aaron Taylor, on the other hand, scored 2 victories with 25 points each, going to him, with 175 points going to his name now. You could probably argue the momentum is in Aaron's favour, rather than Max to try and pick up some points and maybe challenge Matt Hodges. Miles Owens is in 4th place, the TCE teammate of Matt Acton, with Ed Lack in 5th. 6th, Neil Andrews, Alex Everett, 2 do not start, but he still sits in 7th place. James Holman, unfortunately, the second race was a do not start. He sits in 8th place. Matt Emmons is in 9th with Ian Crosby in 10th. Second page, you can see there, starts with Colin Martin, but there's a whole host of drivers who unfortunately haven't been turning up for the past couple of rounds, so you can read all the names down there. There is also a third set of drivers as well. A few drivers who have maybe joined the championship late. Max Crowther, unfortunately, he's not here tonight. He was new last week. Michael Seal, obviously, maybe dropped out halfway through. Matt Green as well, pretty new to it. Ollie Wayne back in as well. But unfortunately, just a few drivers maybe not coming as often as they would have hoped. But that can be for a number of reasons. We can't hold it too much against drivers, especially as the world is starting to rotate again. And people need to get back to seeing their families and whatnot. So that is how the championship is looking at the moment. Obviously, Matt Acton's still in 2nd place in the championship, but Matt Hodges easily leading the way. Aaron Taylor seems to be the driver with all the momentum under his belt as well from the past couple of meetings, getting race victories after race victories. And I can tell you right now, he's currently on pole position. Aaron Taylor in first, 6/10 of a second ahead of Edward Lack. And in fact, let's stop looking at the pit lane and have a look at Aaron Taylor's CXR Project Black machine. Speaking of CXR Project Black, thank you very much for the likes on the stream from those guys and the CXR Racing Leagues, and also Katie Eames, who's also given it a share. Thank you very much. Casey's also come in and said hello in the chat, which is always nice. I hope it wasn't a case of Tom forgetting his luck in and making you drive them to Thuxton instead of streaming. It absolutely wasn't, though. Unfortunately, I would have done a lot to be at Thuxton, but even though it is about a 6-hour drive from me, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. Hopefully, I'll be going to Snetterton and Brands Hatch if there is a pass available to me. I'm guessing the general sale tickets are probably sold out within an instant. So that is one of the things. Oh, big thank you to Matt Emmons as well, who's currently sat down in 9th place. So not entirely sure how he managed to do that whilst also on his outlap. But fair play, Matt. You've given it a good go. Oh, he's pulling over. Maybe that's why. No, he's not really. I made 10 drivers. Yeah, it's not ideal, Milo, but it is what it is. We have to crack on regardless. So, you know, we're going to be... It's championship points are still up for grabs here. There's still racing to be had. Drivers still need to try and score as many points as they can. Oh, it's Miles Owens. Sorry, it's the Milo Gamer on the YouTube chat is Miles Owens, apparently. Aren't you supposed to be out there as well? You're currently sat in the pit lane at the moment. 3 laps less than anybody else. as Miles Owens goes a little bit sideways. Alex Everett is on a pretty good lap. 2 purple sectors from him, and he finishes the lap with a illegal time, potentially? I don't think that... in fact, it wasn't illegal. It wasn't illegal, actually. It may well have been, to be fair, but it doesn't matter because it was about 15 seconds down on where he was hoping to be. At the moment, Aaron Taylor still leading the way by 6/10. Ed Lack still just ahead of Matt Hodges, but you can see on the timing tab on the left-hand side, it's incredibly close between Ed Lack, Matt Hodges, and Neil Andrews, all the CXR black machines, basically. Alex Everett may be the driver to try and upset the apple cart. He's only 2/10 behind, as Matt Hodges puts himself a little bit closer to Aaron Taylor, but he puts himself on the front row, more importantly, from his perspective. Miles Owens in 7th place. George Bland, Matt Emmons, and then new driver Nigel Stock to the championship as well. Haven't seen Nigel before unless he was at Catalonia, but we didn't see him on the championship order either. So maybe he is just all brand new to this series. We've got about 8 minutes to go in qualifying, so we'll run you down what's going to be happening tonight. Basically, there's a 20-minute qualifying, which is pretty obvious because that's exactly what we're doing right now. Then there's a 20-minute sprint race, followed by a 45-minute feature race, in which we sort of delve into a little bit of a podcast-style commentary, to be honest. It probably will be a podcast-style commentary, due to the fact that obviously there isn't as many drivers as there is normally, but there is still quite a lot of action going ahead. Luckily or not, I've got a guest coming on for race number 2. I guess it sounds like there is actually a podcast, isn't it? But for race number 2, Phil McDougall is going to be joining me. He's the head of CXR Black. And I've got a couple of topics to probably chew the fat with him over as well. Not just about Project Black or the GTE League or anything like that, but maybe in the general world of motorsport, including the F1, and hopefully he follows either the F1 or the British touring cars, because I have quite a lot to chew the fat over from them as well, if anybody was watching the touring cars. Yeah, exactly, Casey Ian says, plenty of BTC to talk about in the feature. Yeah, there's plenty of interesting talking points, shall we say, from the BTCC, including the likes of Andy Neat. Obviously, Creasy not being around anymore. That was something that actually broke last Friday. Well, it wasn't last Friday, actually. No, it was the week before, wasn't it? Because we were discussing it. But obviously, the news that Dan Camish was jumping in the car instead launched last Friday, or whatever it was. I can't remember now. I was planning on talking about it last Friday anyway. So that is pretty important. And obviously, he did a damn good job as well. And plus, I've actually got a little bit of an exclusive news, I suppose. Not necessarily about British touring cars. There's nothing that exciting, don't worry, in terms of, you know, driver changes or anything fundamental with the BTCC, but just something that we're doing here on Jacko Racing, well, with one of my commentary mates, which hopefully you guys will be excited about. I will make sure to mention it during the feature race, because it's going to be really exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't watched the full race yet, either F1 or BTCC, so probably not worth the conversation. Oh, gutting that is, Phil. Well, it's alright. I'll rant about it myself then. It'll be fine. Adam Gale is apparently attempting to join the session, but unfortunately he's been waiting 25 minutes for his iRacing to load, which probably is a sign that it's not necessarily going to do such a thing. Which is a big shame, really, because it would have been nice to have Adam Gale in. I can be prepared for next time. Fantastic, Phil. You're going to be, basically, Phil, you're going to become the co-commentator here for the NXTGEN GTE League, GRID Engineering, sorry, GTE League. I hope you're prepared for that. About 5 minutes left to qualifying. Things are pretty much sitting as they were. Neil Andrews, about less than... Neil Andrews and Alex Everett are very close to each other, actually. So Alex has sort of negated his time right down. That final lap he's just done was a couple of tenths quicker, but only still... Oh, Matt Acton, hello, he's joined the party. Matt Acton up to 3rd place in his Porsche GTE. Aaron Taylor, though, he's set in 2 purple sectors at the moment. Matt Acton actually helped propel himself up the order, considering he got a purple sector 5, so that final sector from Matt was absolutely flying. What can Aaron Taylor do? Ed Lack demotes Matt Acton down to 4th place, as Aaron Taylor, he's got 2 purple sectors, 2 yellow sectors. What can the 5th one be? Will it equal out to another flying lap? Another pole position time, potentially? Doesn't look like it. It actually hasn't appeared on the screen, which quite often means it's not legal. Although, if it is legal, it was exactly the same time as he's previously had. So I'm not entirely sure whether that was a new time. But either way, he's still 2/10 to the good of Matt Hodges at the moment. And as I said, Ed Lack just pipping Matt Acton to that 3rd place, which I'm sure Matt won't be too bothered about. He's still on the 2nd row of the grid, and that'll be the overall objective that he wants to have. Go watch some 60-second clip from Thuxtonville, plenty of time to catch up. And Miles Owens also says hello to Phil, so nice to see that there's a cross-platform style conversation going, as Miles is currently on the YouTube chat and Phil is on the Facebook chat. It's the same lap time, says Phil McDougall, so that is why it looked like it was so bloody close. It was because it was bang on the money. Matt Hodges back out there again to try and maybe set another flying lap time. We've only got a couple of minutes left, though. What else is going on further down the order? We've got Alex Everett on 2 green sectors on that previous lap, but it wasn't an improvement. In fact, on that last lap, Matt Hodges, Ed Lack, and Matt Acton all improved on their times. I'm not entirely sure. I think Edward Lack has got a green sector 3. Aaron Taylor's put in in fact, he's got a green sector 4 as well. Is that going to promote him up the order? No, it's not going to promote him, but it is going to solidify his 3rd place. Aaron Taylor is about to come across the line. He's got another purple sector, but the rest of it has been fairly underwhelming, but he is still a 10th quicker, so clearly that sector 3 had a lot of time in him, because the rest of the sectors weren't quite on it, but he's gained a 10th of a second ahead of what he had done previously. Matt Hodges with 2 green sectors. Matt Emmons with 2 green sectors as well. We could see him dive up the order, shall we say, from 9th place, maybe trying to attack that top couple of places. Alex Everett with a purple sector as well, and a green. So let's have a look at him, because he's about to come across. Well, he's coming through the final corner. Let's have a look at how he finishes the lap. Goes back wide, maybe to try and get the line of least resistance. Maybe not, I think, actually. I'm not entirely sure where he's going with that one, but he's coming across the line now. And it was a couple of tenths slower, I believe. So Alex, it may well have been exactly the same time, but it didn't appear on a timing tower, so I don't know if that was actually any better or not. Let's have a look at Matt Acton, who is setting some green times. Matt Emmons as well has come across the line. Has that moved him up at all? It has, up to 8th place ahead of George Bland. Matt Acton in 5th place at the moment, less than a 10th of a second behind Neil Andrews. And he hasn't improved on that one. So only a minute and a half left. That's about only 1 lap. Edward Lack not setting any quicker times. Oh, I say that, actually, that purple final sector may help a little bit. It has helped a touch, but not enough to really do anything in terms of actual racing position or qualifying position. Maybe just eking himself ahead of Neil Andrews. That gap has now gone from about 800ths of a second to a 10th of a second. So, you know, every little helps. And we do see people separated by less than a 100 or 200, say, like Andrews to Acton. And then Acton to Everett as well. So, yeah, like I said, every little helps. Matt Hodges on 2 green sectors in sector 2 and 3. Currently in 2nd place as he's going through the chicane. Running very wide there. You don't necessarily get the 1Xs. But if you do run a little bit too wide, I think off the curb, then you do end up with a couple of off tracks. And that will disqualify your lap time. So that's maybe why you've seen a few drivers going a little bit quicker, but you're not actually seeing them set the actual lap time to sort of credit their speed. Alex Everett going up to 4th position ahead of Neil Andrews. And I said that couple of hundredths will be useful to Lack. Let's have a look at Matt Hodges coming across the line now. And I think he ran a little bit wide because that hasn't counted. Neil Andrews on a flying lap again. He's greened sector 3. But sector 1, 2, and 4 haven't been quite so hot for him. What's he going to do here? The checker flag has dropped. This will be the final action of the qualifying session. And Neil Andrews comes across the line. And it's going to be still 5th place by 0.004 of a second. Well, that is quite incredible. So Alex Everett has got himself onto the 2nd row of the grid. But only just incredibly close action here tonight by the looks of it. Especially that mid-pack, which, to be fair, in a top 10 means the fight for basically 4th place. Matt Emmons says this is hard work. He's sweating already. It's not even that hot outside, Matt. Come on, you got to get fresh. You got a 45-minute race to be preparing for in a little bit. So as we wait for Neil Andrews just to peel into the pits, because that's what we have to do before we can get the results for qualifying. I believe they get an extra minute or two as well, or whoever. If everyone is in the pits, then we can advance the session. Otherwise, it's another minute or two to wait just before we get the qualifying and the grid order for race number 1 this evening. Like I said before, it is race number 1. Is a 20-minute feature, 20-minute sprint race, which is basically like the 20-minute qualifying session. And then there is a reverse top 10, which is a full reverse grid in essence today, for the 45-minute feature race, which is going to be really cool to have along as well. So I hope you stick around. Please do give a like or a share or a comment on the Facebook stream. I'll try and get back to you or shout you out if you do such a thing. If you like it on the YouTube, I can't see it, but I will thank you immensely. And then if you are also, you know, jumping in for a chat, maybe you're supporting one of the drivers, maybe you are one of the drivers, now you want to give a bit of lowdown on what you're thinking tonight, what's maybe your feedback from Imola, maybe what you got planned for the weekend, anything basically, what you had for dinner, then do please jump into the chat and have a word with us as well. We can see both the YouTube and the Facebook chat here, and I will try my best to have a chat with everyone, as I don't have myself a co-commentator. Might as well chat to no one. So we're still just waiting for the session to be advanced, hoping that it'll be relatively soon so we can progress with race number 1 here this evening. Obviously, we've had quite a few drivers jump in and out of the championship. 29 drivers in total have featured, well, 30 now actually have featured over the course of the series, but it's just a shame that we haven't necessarily kept all of those drivers along. Like we said, though, we can't necessarily blame them. Aaron Taylor on pole position, ahead of Matthew Hodges. Ed Lack in 3rd place. Alex Everett setting the apple cart for CXR Project Black. He's in 4th place. It says exiled. That's not supposed to be there. That is supposed to say Crest Autosport. Neil Andrews in 5th place. Matt Acton in 6th. Miles Owens in 7th. Matt Emmons is in 8th. George Bland, his teammate, is in 9th. With Nigel Stock in 10th place. And as the drivers start to line up for what will be the first race of the evening, hopefully they're all going to keep it clean and enjoyable, because the last thing we need is obviously people to crash out, especially when there's such little number. We don't want anybody to not really enjoy themselves. Obviously, we want everybody to try and get as good a racing as they can, even if there is only a few people. You only need 2 people to have an enjoyable race. That's what I always say. Not that I ever say it on a broadcast. But Aaron Taylor with the lights coming on. The engine notes are rising. A flash of the lights in the background by Miles Owens, but they are away. And Aaron Taylor's got an absolutely fantastic start. Ed Lack has got ahead of Matt Hodges, who didn't necessarily get the start that he was hoping for. Neil Andrews has jumped in front of Alex Everett, and it's the CXR Project Black crew who are leading the way so far. Matt Hodges has lost 1 position, but you wouldn't know it from all those different, all those same liveries that are currently leading the pack. Alex Everett has lost 1 place, but he's hoping to maybe take that back if he can get his nose up the inside in this sprint race. The TCE drivers of Matt Acton and Miles Owens have swapped positions for 6th and 7th position. As Ed Lack goes a little bit wide, I think Hodges looks up to the inside. He's obviously the driver with probably the most chance at winning this championship, although Aaron Taylor may well disagree with that, considering the amount of speed that he's been carrying. Speaking of carrying speed, Alex Everett runs wide and locks up. He couldn't slow the car down, and he's going side by side, I believe. In fact, no, Miles Owens has had a crash. He's spanning in the background, and Neil Andrews has now gotten ahead of Alex Everett by a good 0.7 of a second, which could be really dangerous for Alex, because he could be sucked into a battle that was full well behind him rather than trying to get involved with the battle ahead of him. Nigel Stock, I believe, has had a spin as well. So Miles Owens and Nigel Stock not keeping it clean on the first lap, although we don't know what happened. It's likely that there weren't any sort of contact, as we didn't hear anything. But Ed Lack gets ahead of Aaron Taylor. Aaron Taylor dropping back. What happened there? Aaron Taylor just slamming the brakes on. Did he have a slowdown? I'm not entirely sure. So as it stands, it is Ed Lack leading the race from Aaron Taylor, Matt Hodges and Neil Andrews. Alex Everett top 5. Matt Acton, George Bland in 6th and 7th. Matt Emmons in 8th. And Miles Owens in 9th. And Nigel Stock rounding out the top 10. Let's have a look at what happened to Miles Owens on this opening lap. He was ahead of his teammate as Alex Everett locks up ahead of him. He's just carried too much speed. Oh, he just loses it, doesn't he? Luckily, he doesn't collect anybody else. He holds the brakes. Exactly what you should do. Aaron Taylor getting nice and close to the back of Edlac again, though. It's always interesting to see the dynamics of these CXR Project Black machines, making sure that they're obviously racing nice and clean. Maybe they're employing some tactics, we're not entirely sure. But it is always nice to see that they actually, you know, when they go race to race, door-to-door racing, rather than just sort of letting themselves pull away in the distance, really. Obviously, they want at least 3 of the drivers in the top 3 on the podium, but if they can get 1, 2, 3, 4, that's ideal for the drivers, and that's exactly the sort of stuff they're employing now. So I'm sure Phil McDougall, who is going to be joining us for race number 2, will be pleased with what he's seeing at the moment. Do let us know in the chat, though. So as we currently looking at Aaron Taylor trying to maybe find a way past his teammate, to have a little bit further down Alex Everett then. And so what happened to him off the start? We can actually go back and maybe have a quick look at that. In fact, no, let's have a look at Nigel Stock's incident. As who was that going into the pits? It was Aaron Taylor going into the pits. Did he get a jump start maybe? Nigel Stock just losing the rear end as he was trying to avoid the TCE car of Miles Owens, which is unfortunate. But Aaron Taylor, pit lane at the moment, is he going to have a stop-go penalty? Did he jump the start? Or is it going to be just straight up that he put the wrong setup on the car? Maybe he's left his qualifying setup on and he doesn't have enough fuel to make it all the way through the race. That has happened before. It's actually happened to me. I just carried on going until I ran out of fuel, though, because I didn't realise what had happened. But Aaron Taylor, I'm sure, well, he is a lot better than me. So he probably would have caught that a little bit sooner rather than later. And as I can just hear a little bit of commotion downstairs, I'm just going to make sure that they... I do apologise about this. It's not the most professional thing in the world, but I can hear quite a lot of commotion. I'm just going to make sure that the dog hasn't caused mischief and basically broken something or anything like that. So we'll be back in 2 seconds, just making sure that everything is okay downstairs. I'll keep it on Neil Andrews as he's nice and close to the driver ahead, and he's also being chased by Alex Everett. Oh, it's a big spin by Ed Lack. Edward Lack, just as we're about to go. There's had a spin there, and he's now just outside the top 5. I'll be back in 2 seconds. Apologies, that was it's just my dog banging on the door. I thought he had broken something, but he's just trying to get out because he can hear my voice, so it's all fine. Matt was just leading the way, but all of a sudden the CXR Project Black machines that were leading this race in the typical fashion that they normally do have sort of upset themselves slightly. Neil Andrews jumping into the pits, obviously, and Ed Lack just having a spin, which we will have another look at, obviously. Nigel Stock has had another incident. Kate Eames says that was Monday Fun Day you ran out, wasn't it? It was indeed. Let's have a look at Ed Lack. What happened to him here? Did he just dob a wheel onto the outside of the circuit? Too much speed through the chicane, maybe? Hit the apexes? Oh, that just seemed to upset the car. Maybe he put too much power down as he was going over the curb. Not entirely sure. As Neil Andrews goes through the penultimate corner and through the final one, it is going to be Matt Hodges, our championship leader in all fairness, leading the way, which I'm sure he won't be too upset about, followed by Neil Andrews, his teammate, obviously, who has scored a couple of race wins in this GTE GTE series so far. Since joining, I think the CXR Project Black extra drivers joined about 2 or 3, I think it was the 3rd or 4th round in to the championship. Obviously, I think Matt Hodges was racing in the Solar Sim Racing liveries before that, then got asked to be part of the CXR Project Black, and he decided to drag some of his teammates along with him, as well as new teammates to join in with the fun here at the next-gen powered GRID Engineering GTE League. Alex Everett, obviously a long-standing friend with the next-gen crew. He's been racing in a lot of their series. He's also been racing in the Exiled series, as well as organising some of their series, as well as everything he does with Crest. And I can tell you that he's actually now, he broadcasts the Legends on Wednesday night for Next Gen as well. He's not only doing that, he's also working with Sim Racers World, who I do a little bit of work with as well, and he's broadcasting an upcoming series with them as well, which will be very exciting. I think it's the Apex League, which is going to be absolutely cracking. You can catch the debut of that tomorrow on Sim Racers World YouTube as well. Not often that I actually promote other people's stuff on stream, but I will promote that one as I work quite closely with. Well, I work for them basically, which is always nice. And you can go and see what Alex is up to tomorrow with that stream if you like. I think it's broadcasting. The debut is tomorrow, and then normally it's on Sundays, which I cover a MX5 series, which is why I couldn't do it. But I am excited to see how Alex gets on. Aaron Taylor's just set the purple lap of the race, by the way. If anybody was wondering, he's in 10th place, a 1:38.89. So as soon as Aaron's now back with it on circuit as well, warming the tyres up, he's absolutely flying. And I'll tell you what, he's got 1.8 seconds to the back of Nigel Stock. Unfortunately, after that, it was quite a lot of time between himself, Matt Emmons, Miles Owens, George Bland. Realistically, like the gaps on the, well, in fact, you can see the gaps on the left-hand side of the screen because I've left the interval up. A good 12 seconds for George Bland to Ed Lack. Miles Owens obviously is second behind George, so that could be closed quite quickly if Aaron is continuing the pace that he shows. But realistically, we've only got 11 minutes left of this race, meaning that it's going to take a lot to catch up any kind of meaningful positions here for Aaron Taylor. But considering there's only 10 drivers here tonight, you can actually score quite a few points by just finishing the race, which is quite advantageous for a lot of these drivers. It's a fair play to plug away, as Alex gave you a mention on his Wednesday. Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you very much, Alex. Yeah, it's, when we at Sim Racers World, when we realised that there was no broadcasters available for Saturday for the Apex League, I was like straight on the phone to Alex saying, we need a broadcaster. You're far too good at iRacing to be just doing it once a week, so get involved. And that's exactly what he's doing, which is nice to see as well. We've got another broadcaster joining us. It's always nice to sort of see new people get involved and hopefully expand and get good work. George Bland is caught right up to the back of Miles Owens. In fact, no, Miles Owens has overtaken George Bland, hasn't he? But as I say that, it's all of a sudden, it's like London buses, isn't it? You sort of wait around for something to happen, and all of a sudden there's 3 battles going on at once. Aaron Taylor and Nigel Stock is probably going to boil over quicker than the race lead battle, as they're both teammates for the race lead. But Aaron Taylor's probably going to try and get a good run out of the last apex here, get his foot clean away, and then there we go, use the draft that Imola is famous for to get up the inside. But he didn't stay in that slipstream for very long, did he? He's not hanging about, was showing his intention. Hopefully we don't see a George Russell, Valtteri Bottas moment here as they go towards the inside. I think Nigel's probably... Oh, I tell you what, that's a bit of a cut-up by Aaron Taylor there. He was very confident that he was going to be able to go back to that racing line. Cutting up Nigel's stock a little bit there. Obviously, he's on a mission today. Do they need producers, Phil? You can explain to me what kind of producing material that you're talking about, sort of thing, because I think at the moment we just do broadcasting and commentary, but I'm sure that there's always an opportunity to have a conversation, put it that way. So as Hodges and Andrews are, they're not, I wouldn't necessarily call them fighting, they're just sort of trying to get away from Alex Everett, and they're doing it relatively successfully as well. 1.8 seconds the gap now they've opened up over the past 2 or 3 laps, really, as Hodges now looks like he's under attack, and in fact, He doesn't just look like he's under attack. He's looking like he's going defensive on his teammate Neil Andrews here. He's maybe just biding his time. And he's got all Max Verstappen on him as well as he flies around the outside. But he wasn't able to get the move done and dusted. So Hodges still leads the way. And Alex Everett will be watching this thinking, what on earth are you doing, boys? You were pulling away from me at one point. And now you're back within half a second. Maybe Alex doesn't have the ultimate pace. But in a 20-minute sprint race, all you need to do is really get track position. Oh, no, producers and non-speaking broadcasters. So yeah, that would be broadcasters basically. Sim Racers World, we actually just do. The broadcaster has to commentate as well to try and keep costs down. But if you want to have a chat, I do know some companies that do like to have a broadcaster who doesn't have to speak as well, like just a broadcaster who concentrates on the cameras, and then they have two commentators who work alongside with them. I've done a bit of both of them, so if you want to have that chat afterwards, Phil, I'm all ears. So Alex has caught right back up, and I tell you what, that was a good exit as well compared to Neil Andrews. The only Ferrari on the grid is Alex Everett, and he has been pretty much the only Ferrari on the grid since he's joined. They did get an opportunity once in this series to change cars and to change fortunes potentially, as I know Paul Scott, I believe, was in the BMW for a long time, but Paul, unfortunately, is not here. Now, he was, I think, one of the only drivers who was in a BMW at all. There was a Ferrari driver at one point as well, but I can't remember because it was right at the beginning of the series. So, Alex flying the Italian flag here at Imola. The fans, I'm sure, will be hoping for maybe an exciting finish to the end of this race, as we've got about 6 minutes left to go. Aaron Taylor's caught up to the back of Matt Evans here, and I'm sure Matt will be feeling the pressure. I don't know whether he's opened his back door, as Katie has suggested, but I'm sure he'll be getting a bit hot under the collar as he's got this driver up ahead. As Matt and Alex Everett, though, we're going to have to cut back to him because he's making moves on Neil Andrews. He gets a little bit shaken out wide, but it's a good run off the exit of the hairpin, going towards the chicane. Again, a little bit of door banging. Hopefully, iRacing doesn't overreact and kick them both off. But Alex Everett has his Ferrari ahead, and the fans at Imola will be going mad for that one. Looking at the inside is Neil Andrews, but it's not to be for now. So Alex Everett, he is upsetting the apple cart here, isn't he? Because they've had 4 of the CXR Project Black machines leading this race. Well, it's now down to just the one of Matt Hodges, followed by now the Crest Autosport driver, Alex Everett, and then Neil Andrews. So a bit of a Project Black sandwich going on at the moment. Matt Acton just looking on in envy, to be honest, because he hasn't once been able to, in the past 3 or 4 rounds, I think 4 rounds now, he hasn't once been able to claw back any points on his championship rival of Matt Hodges. And it's unfortunate, really, because I was watching back the PMR Porsche Cup, and Matt Acton was which this series is basically replicated from last year, last season, of the NXTGEN seasons. Anyway, it's a bit complicated how they do it, but basically they have 11 weeks, and then they have about a month off, and then another 11 weeks. But basically, the Porsche PMR Cup was the series that ran very much in sort of the same format as what you're watching now, the GRID Engineering. Slightly different. They had 2 qualifyings and a slightly shorter sprint race, but apart from that, this was born from that format. As a big hit on the backside from Neil Andrews, and I believe, actually, Alex Everett just about survived that one, but that's brought Matt Acton right back into the mix. So I'll save my little Matt Acton anecdote for a bit later on, because Alex has got into 2nd place, Neil Andrews in 3rd, Matt Acton still in 4th. So it's basically as they were, but everything's just got a touch tighter. Matt Hodges is driven away with a 3-second gap, and Neil Andrews just seems to be making a few too many mistakes at the moment. He's obviously, he was a little bit closer to Matt Hodges at one point, nearly 2 seconds ahead of Alex Everett, and then the Project Black drivers started to fall over each other as Andrews tried to make a move for the race lead. Didn't quite happen for him, and then he's been overtaken by Alex, and then he almost hit him off as well. So Matt Acton could be trying to take some points back and get onto the podium for the first time in a while. But yeah, Matt Acton, he was part of the Porsche PMR Cup, and we had a whole host of really good drivers in that one as well, and it boiled down to David Ward and Matt Acton going for the championship on the last round at the Nürburgring, and Matt just missed out on that one. David Ward was a pretty big monster in that in the Porsche 911 GT3 car. I can understand maybe that anybody losing to him because he is very good at driving it. But Matt here, it's clearly not quite got the pace of the GTE cars either. So it's a bit of a shame for him. He's always going to be there or thereabouts. Basically, at the moment, it seems that if you can beat Matt Acton, you'll win the championship. And at the moment, Alex Everett is leading from Neil Andrews, and Matt Hodges leading the entire race with 2.5 minutes to go. Oh my God. Sorry, just had a... my phone's been going mental. Oh, there we go. Phone's been going mental. Newcastle, the football team that I support. And actually, I won't say it because there might be spoilers. We'll keep to the racing that's in front of us, shall we? Rather than going off on a tangent about football, because probably the people watching this really don't care about it. So it's fine. Miles Owens had another crash, actually. So we're just going to jump to that one as the drivers go through the chicane now. So what happened to Miles? He obviously had a spin earlier on in the session. Did he just go wide through the penultimate corner? He does, and that really doesn't set him up nicely for the final corner. And then he has a little bit of a touch with George Bland. But I think George got away with it somewhat. But Miles' front end certainly hasn't gotten away with it. We're going to be going on to what I believe will be the final lap of the race. Maybe final lap of the race. It depends how quickly they can get it. It's going to be touch and go, actually, because Matt Hodges just started it. He's currently lapping at a 1:40, though. So this will probably be the final lap of the race, which is a bit of a shame, really, because it's ending all too early. But remember, we've got a 45-minute feature race to be coming up as well. So we'll be sure to bring you that live here on Jacko Racing. Don't go anywhere to miss that. You want to be... Oh, we have a couple of minutes in between. Maybe go and get a cup of tea. Maybe go to the toilet. Do whatever you need to do. And make sure you're back to watch as Aaron Taylor's just overtaken Miles Owens. Neil Andrews going through. We keep missing this. Alex Everett getting attacked around the outside by Neil Andrews, who seems to enjoy trying to go around the outside of drivers. As Alex probably was defending hard and still defending. I think these drivers know that it's a final lap dash to the end now, as Hodges maybe just taking it a touch easy. He's lost a couple of tenths, and that's wide by Neil Andrews, and it's very wide by him as well, as he locks up the brakes and spins around and gives Matt Acton a third place gifted there. Ed Lack moved now up to fourth as well, as he had that spin earlier on from the lead of the race. But we're going to go straight up to focus on... I'll tell you what, Neil Andrews is actually quite lucky that he's got a 35-second gap. Although he hasn't got a 35-second gap, actually. George Bland may be attacking him. But as we round out the final couple of corners, it's going to be Matt Hodges to take the race victory. He can slow it just a touch to make sure the checkered flag has dropped. The checkered flag has dropped. He flashes the lights. And it's a race victory here for Matt Hodges, who extends his lead in the championship. Alex Everett comes away with a hard-fought and well-deserved second place. Matt Acton with the third, and I think that's the first time that we haven't seen any of the other Project Black drivers on the podium this season. It may have happened to Catalunya, but I didn't see it happen, so I'm not counting it. Aaron Taylor and Neil Andrews actually finished in 5th place in the end, just behind Ed Lack. Aaron Taylor coming up to finish in 6th, followed by George Bland, and then Miles Owens as well, with the rather battered and bruised front end of the Porsche. Nigel Stock comes across the line to take 9th. And unfortunately last, but definitely not least, Matt Emmons taking home the 10th place. And look at it this way, Matt, it's a top 10. And you said you'd be happy with that at the beginning of the season, so let's just hold on to that one, shall we? Full confirmation of the results coming up on your screen now. As you can see, that Matt Hodges was confirmed as a 2.3 second gap between himself and Alex Everett, who had a little bit of a clash with Neil Andrews towards the end there. CXR were not the impenetrable force that we're used to seeing, as Matt Acton takes 3rd place as well. Edward Lack was leading the race at one point and then ended up having a spin all on his own. Neil Andrews had to settle for 5th on that final lap lunge around the outside of Alex Everett. Aaron Taylor ended up in the pits after about 2 laps. I think there was a stop-and-go penalty involved, or potentially maybe even just a drive-through. Actually, it may well have just been a setup change. I'm not entirely sure. We don't know. Somebody can tell me in the second race, hopefully. George Bland finished in 7th, with Miles Owens in 8th, Nigel Stock in 9th, and Matt Emmons in 10th. So, as the first race of the evening, apparently it wasn't supposed to be a standing start as well, so we may well see a change in the start procedure for race number 2. But I believe that we have to jump out of this session and go into a new one with the top 10 reversed as well. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes. If we have a driver to interview, we'll be coming back a little bit shorter as well. A little bit sooner, sorry. But we'll be back as soon as we can for the race number 2 of the evening, a 45-minute feature race. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a sec. Hello, everybody. Oh, there we go. There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GRID Engineering GTE Season 1 for round 16 here at Imola. We've had a frantic and fantastic race, round 15, the 20-minute round, and we're about to go into the 45-minute feature race. Apparently, there is a top 10 reverse grid, so if you're good enough to remember who came 10th in the previous round, well, then you already know who pole position is. But we'll be able to bring you the grid as soon as it's available to us, which is in about a couple of seconds' time, hopefully. And with that, you'll also be able to figure out what the finishing results from race number 1 are, because we can't bring up the results, unfortunately, anymore. But you will be able to figure it out just by reversing the grid order. And as the grid is starting to come into place now, we're jumping forward to the session, and there we go. No, that's not it. There we go. Matt Emmons is on pole position. He came in 10th in the previous race. It is this time a rolling start rather than a standing start as well, so we will be getting the proper GTE start. Nigel Stock on second with Miles Owens in third. George Bland fourth. Aaron Taylor's in fifth. Neil Andrews in sixth. Ed Lack in seventh. Matt Acton was third in the first race, which means he's lining up in eighth. Alex Everett was ninth in the first race. He was second in the first race, which means he's lining up in ninth. And Matt Hodges took the race victory in race number 1, round 15 here, and that means he's lining up in 10th position. Now, it's not normally a full reverse grid, it's just due to the fact that obviously we've got a few other people missing with us this evening, but that doesn't matter too much. The racing has still been just as exciting. So as the drivers are lining up, we can maybe have a think about what we're going to be doing tonight. And as the pace car pulls away, I can confirm that we do have Phil McDougall somewhere in the wings, waiting to be dragged in probably about 10 minutes, 15 minutes time and into the race. We can have a chat about all things CXR, Project Black, sim racing, what we got going on here as well. And I believe he's actually spectating the server, so he can actually see exactly what you guys are seeing as well, as I've given him the room name for SDK. But as Matt Emmons is leading them away, it will be a new experience, I think, for him to lead the pack off and to try and get the jump on everyone else. I don't think he's had the pole position before here. And I tell you what, he's gone very, very early, and he's got the jump, especially on Nigel Stock. Miles Owens goes into second place, and he's going to have the inside going into the first chicane as well. But it is Matt Emmons who's leading the way by half a second already. Let's have a look at Miles Owens flying up to the inside now. And in fact, George Bland's tried to follow suit as well. Going in, a little bit of a lockup, but the brakes means he couldn't quite get it. But a wide, well, very wide from Matt Emmons. So wide that he's already in the pits. Which means Miles Owens, a TCE car, who, he didn't mince his words in the YouTube chat. I'll probably colour it slightly differently. He messed it up in his own words. Not quite his own words, but similar. In the YouTube chat. Race 1, well, he's hoping to make amends in race number 2. Aaron Taylor, who ended up having to go into the pits after leading the way and obviously qualifying on pole position, is currently in 4th place and trying to make amends. Alex Everett goes past Matt Acton. He's in 7th place. And now it's very important to note as well that there is championship points up for grabs here. Not only that, there's a championship to be decided, which can be decided tonight. It can be decided in this race specifically. I can confirm that. I think actually, I'll do that in a second. As Aaron Taylor goes through on George Bland, and then Neil Andrews follows suit as well. George Bland ends up, I think, losing a whole host of places. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up right at the back. Alex Everett going to the inside. Ed Lack around the outside, which will turn into the inside, of course, in the Ford. The Chevrolet maybe trying to launch one at the inside. No, a little bit of a lockup means that he might actually be under attack from Matt Acton. George Bland bleeding places at the moment. Nigel Stock currently in 2nd place. Tell you what, he's having to go back at Aaron Taylor, and he's got the run on him as well. Aaron Taylor goes through, however, and into 1st place. In fact, no, sorry, that was Aaron Taylor overtaking Nigel Stock. Got mixed up then as we've lost Matt Emmons. That's the driver we've lost earlier on. Neil Andrews now looking to get up the inside into the hairpin. Not quite happening yet. Alex Everett will probably be hoping... sorry, not the hairpin. That's the next corner. Alex Everett will be hoping that they end up fighting with each other as well, so he can try and get in on the mix as Stock goes wide after a little bit of a lock-up into the corner. Why does he always lock up the brakes? Is what Matt Evans has said on the chat. Onto the inside, though, goes Andrews, and I think it's going to be a fairly easy place gain for him if he doesn't run too wide. Get it back onto the track. There we go. Ahead of Stock. So Stock not quite bleeding as quickly as George Bland, but certainly going backwards, that's for sure. Miles Owens is now being attacked by what is, frankly, an extremely quick driver of Aaron Taylor. I don't think anybody can quite dispute that. And as I said, there is a championship to decide. Well, Aaron Taylor is one of the drivers that is involved in that championship. He's certainly got something to be fighting for here this evening. We'll break it down a little bit later in the race. As soon as all the action starts to calm down, Alex Everett going around the outside of Nigel Stock and will turn into the inside for the penultimate corner. He's got his nose ahead and done dusted. Miles still defending, trying to maybe bring the CXR Project Black cars back a touch towards the action of Alex Everett, with Matt Acton obviously attempting to carve through the order. Ed Lack goes past Nigel Stock now. I don't think Owens got any opportunity to defend here. Aaron Taylor's already to move to the inside, got his nose there as well, but a hugely late braking there by Miles Owens, and he's collided with the sleeping policeman. Tell you what, actually, Andrews going around the outside here, it could be the driver to take advantage fully of that one, because Taylor had to come out of it and risking that contact with Miles Owens, who he's not giving up the ghost here, and he's been tapped by Andrews. And hopefully Ed Lack doesn't get caught in that one either, and nobody else does. Nigel Stock's going to have to take evasive action as we focus on Aaron Taylor, Neil Andrews, and he's got Alex Everett for company yet again. So these drivers sparking up a confrontation which they had in race number 1. Alex Everett came out on top in that one, and actually Matt Acton took advantage of a little bit of a late spillage for Neil Andrews on the last lap, but at the moment it's Taylor, Andrews, Everett, Lack and Acton are your top 5. That could all change within an instant, though, a blink of the eye in essence. Nigel Stock, George Bland, Miles Owens and Matt Evans are right at the back, and I think, yeah, Matt Evans has just about gotten out back going again, so he had a hefty amount of damage that he had to try and fix in the pits. Everett getting a nice clean exit out of the chicane now, going down towards the sort of back end of the circuit. The quick right-hander down the hill that will set up to be the outside for the penultimate corner. It's going to be a squeeze there if he's going to attempt to do it. It's only really one line. If you can try and make it, it's a good overtaking opportunity, but it doesn't quite fall the way of the Ferrari at the moment. But he does now have a slowdown. He has a big slowdown. Alex Everett in probably the worst part of the track that you can possibly imagine to have a slowdown here at Imola. He's been given one, and I'm not entirely sure why. To be honest, it didn't look like he cut the circuit all that much. He must have done something wrong. So all of a sudden, it's the CXR Project Black cars 1, 2, and 3. Matt Hodges actually is a driver that hasn't really come back out, and Matt Evans has had another crash by the looks of it. So let's have a look and see what happened to Matt Evans actually. Oh, he just absolutely mullers the curbs. Sleeping policeman, locks the brakes, and goes straight on. I realised that I just cut away as we were seeing Alex Everett and Matt Acton going tooth and nail at it, but nothing's happened just yet. So Miles Owens had a crash as well. Now this is what happened to him. Obviously he was in the lead of this race, and then it was going side by side with Aaron Taylor. No, it wasn't Aaron Taylor, was it? It was Neil Andrews at the time. Aaron Taylor took advantage of it, but Aaron Taylor's was the actual one. Neil Andrews, sorry, was the actual one who made contact initially. And then Matt Evans had one other incident as well. So he'd come out the pits at this point, fixed his repairs, and is he just going to pull over and give up the ghost? I think he is. Matt Evans gives up the ghost. He was 3 laps down. I can sort of understand it, but it is a bit of a shame. In fact, what we might do is drag Matt Evans into the comments box as well. So hopefully we'll have a chat with Phil McDougall and Matt Evans to keep us going for this 45-minute feature race. Although, to be fair, it's actually heating up quite nicely. And in case we do get Matt Evans here, I'm just going to try and start a little bit of a stream. So if someone does join me in the commentary box, they can see kids messing around outside my house banging fence panels, says Matt Evans. There's a reason why he's had to jump away from the sim. I'm pretty sure that happened the other day as well, which is a big shame. That's pesky kids and their fence panels. Go out there and sort them out, Matt. Give them a good telling off. try and get that stream working if it works. But Phil McDougall is in the interview waiting room, so in a couple of minutes' time we will try and drag him in to have a chat. But obviously we want things to maybe calm down just a touch before that happens, as Alex is really chasing down Matt Acton now. I think it's a pretty close fought thing to who's actually got the pace. If you look at qualifying, I think it was Alex Everett. He was very close to the CXR driver. He's a very talented driver, is Alex, in pretty much everything, especially rallying. So it's no wonder that he's gotten to grips with the GTE as quickly as he has. A bit of a shame that he just wasn't here for the entire series, because he was certainly the driver who's put his name in the mix. Apparently James Holman was come on to the chat on the Discord as well. Apparently James unfortunately got stuck at work. Now he's a driver that's really thrown his hat into the mix in recent weeks, which is a bit of a shame to see him not be able to join us this evening. With any luck, he'll be back next time. I want to hear more about Matt Evans' fence panel excursions with his kids outside, because I'm pretty sure they were throwing woks. They were throwing woks, yeah, they were having a stir fry and ended up throwing the woks at the windows. No, rocks at the windows the other day, which is obviously nothing you really want to hear about. So hopefully, Matt, you get that sorted out sooner rather than later, or maybe they just grow out of it, but that could take far too long, really. I fear for your fence panels. Neil Andrews versus Ed Lack then. So in the previous race, we sort of saw that the CXR drivers, they may not necessarily treat each other badly, but they are willing to get their elbows out. They are willing to, one, attack the driver ahead of them, and two, defend pretty hard against the drivers behind them as well, even if they're their own teammate. And if anything, actually, we saw that with Neil Andrews and I believe it was Matt Hodges. It was Matt Hodges, actually. Neil Andrews and Matt Hodges in race one, and that invited Alex Everett right up to the back bonnet of Andrews, and actually ended up overtaking him and costing him second place. He actually ended up in fourth, if anybody is able to remember. But a huge difference between where he could have been and where he ended up finishing, as we're watching Andrews and Lack here. After these guys have done squabbling, what I will do is break down the championship situation for you, because it has changed slightly, and I can tell you that there is a possibility that we will crown a champion this evening, which is pretty big news as well. So keep an eye out on that. But as soon as everything's sort of died down, at the moment, there is no champion to be... well, there is a champion eventually, but right now there isn't the champion to be crowned. Mainly because Matt Hodges is all the way down in 6th position. It's actually surprising. I would have expected Matt to have carved through the order a little bit quicker. Maybe he's had a little bit of argy-bargy. I can tell you what, though, if these guys start fighting, Alex Everett and Matt Acton start fighting, this is a huge move at the inside from Alex Everett. And I tell you what, there's a massive amount of speed carried in by Acton. He doesn't even hit the sleeping policeman that badly. He's going to defend into the hairpin. We've seen Everett try and get the cut back. We've seen him fly around the outside as well. He can do which way or the other to try and get a good exit. But this is allowing Matt Hodges, who was about 2.5 seconds back at one point, about a lap and a half ago, to really catch up. And it's going to be Everett late on the brakes and onto the apex as well. Is he going to be able to keep it clean? He runs a little bit wide, but he keeps advantage. F1 wouldn't let him do it, but iRacing seems to have let him do that with the track limit as they try and get to the apex. There we go. It is going to be Alex Everett into 4th place, and Neil Andrews and Ed Lack still in the order that we left them in. So Alex getting past with a nice clean bit of battling between himself and Matt Acton as well. Really good driving for the both of them. So as the drivers are starting to sort of bed themselves into the positions potentially, we will just keep an eye on these drivers, because obviously they're now going on to the slipstream. The start-finish straight is every opportunity for not only Acton to try and launch an attack back on Everett, but also Hodges to sort of latch himself onto the back. And if anything, Hodges is actually closer to Acton than Acton is to Everett, only by about 1/10 of a second. But the closing speeds here at Imola can be quite drastic, as the slipstream does play a major part, not necessarily too much for the GTE cars, mainly because the likes of the TCR cars and the MX-5s and stuff, they're like bricks basically, so they punch a massive hole in the air ahead of them. However, the GTEs, they're sort of a bit slippier. The sort of slipstream effect isn't potentially as abusive as the TCRs or the MX-5s. And so you see less closing speeds. And I've covered a lot of Skip Barbers here. Covered one very memorable Skip Barber round. MX-5s and TCRs. And you can quite often guarantee that on any one lap, there's at least 4 wide going into that first chicane, especially on the first lap, where you see 3 rows of 4 wide. It's madness. But the GTE cars not really lending themselves to that sort of slipstream quite as much. There is an effect, it's not quite as heavy. 13 minutes into this 45-minute feature race, then you see Aaron Taylor on in first place with Neil Andrews in second. Ed Lack rounding out the CXR podium with Alex Everett, and then the battle you're seeing on screen at the moment, Matt Acton and Matt Hodges, who really needs to carve through if he's going to have any hope in potentially securing a championship this evening. In fact, that's what we'll probably mention right now, is apparently if Matt Hodges outscores Aaron Taylor by 5 points, which right now does not look likely, considering Aaron Taylor is in the lead by about just over 5 seconds. And if you want to have a look at the gap between the leader and Matt Hodges, it's about 9.3 seconds, so it's not likely, although anything can happen. That's what would have to happen for Matt Hodges to win the championship tonight. Otherwise, it will go over to next week, which obviously is still, well, we got 19 rounds. This is round 16, so we got about 3 more weeks worth of racing to come your way. But Matt Hodges could secure the championship victory by first race next week if he doesn't secure it tonight. But it is a bit of a stretch now for him to secure it tonight, to be fair. So yeah, a bit of a difficult one. So I think it's about a pretty good time, to be honest, as these drivers seem to be just bedding themselves into this race. About 15 minutes in, to introduce our guest for the evening. And that guest, mentioned him a couple of times, is Phil McDougall. And Phil, I've dragged you into the commentary box. You may feel like it's a little bit premature because we've got still some action out on circuit, but I just wanted to get you in to have a chat, as there is less action on circuit because one of your drivers, championship hopeful Matt Hodges, has had a spin through the chicane. Have you seen it?
I was just about to say that was the wrong time, wasn't it?
It is a little bit awkward, I'll be honest.
But hey Jack, how are you doing?
I am not bad, yeah, Phil. It's nice to finally get you on the mic as well, because you've been saying it for a while since CXR obviously joined us for the championship. It'd be nice to have a chat to you. So do explain for the viewers at home, if they're not sure, what your position is with CXR.
So I'm one of the team principals at CXR Racing, or CXR Project Black, along with Neil M. Andrews, who you're currently on screen with now. So yeah, we kind of share the position, run the team, and yeah, just get things going. So yeah.
Well, it's fascinating to see, isn't it? Because obviously we sort of want to know a little bit more about CXR and everything like that. We've had a couple of interviews, I think, with Ed Lack and people and some of the other drivers. But I suppose how long has CXR been going? How did it come about?
Well, I guess CXR originally came about 8 years ago as a kind of just a group of guys who just enjoyed racing. But that was like back in, 8 years ago on Forza 5, I think it was.
Oh, what a game.
And then we progressed and went on to all the other sims. There were like Project Cars and Project Cars 2, all the different Formula 1 games. And then about 2 years ago, we made the switch over to iRacing. And that's where we kind of formed the team CXR Project Black. So that's where we started to take it a bit more seriously than just a few guys just meeting up every like Thursday night or whatever night it was we raced. I can't remember. But yeah, ever since then we've just taken it a bit more seriously. We practice for events. We have people who sit there and make setups. Like the guy who makes the setups that all of the guys are racing tonight doesn't race in this league. So it's a very team-wide kind of organization, and everybody has a part to play. So yeah, it's good.
I was going to say, well, it sounds like, because obviously we got 4 drivers here tonight, because you recently got the services of Matt Hodges, obviously, who didn't shine himself in glory just then, to be honest. But yeah, how big is the operation then? Obviously, the guy who makes the setup's not here tonight. Then, how many drivers you got on the books?
I'm going to say, I would like to say there's about 15 to 20 of us. If I was going to count everybody, not all of us do team events. Some of us kind of race solo for the team. Some of us do more endurance-based racing. So some of us are based more in like prototype cars. So Neil, as you're on screen with him now, he's more of a prototype car driver. And then you've got more of your GT drivers. We have some open wheel drivers. We have some Porsche Cup drivers. So there's a good spread, but there's a good spread of guys who actually race as part of like team events, and a good spread that race solo for the teams.
With the team events and stuff like that, are you talking about the iRacing endurance events, so the 24 hours, the 12 hours of Spa,
Yes.
and all those sort of things? Do you get involved with them?
Yeah, so we normally have at least one team going in all of the special events that go on iRacing, but then we also do a lot of kind of private league, big kind of endurance series as well. We've not done too many for the past season because of obviously the whole pandemic situation. We wanted to reduce the kind of workload. We were racing every weekend. It gets a little bit much for the drivers when obviously you're trying to balance everything else that's going on. So we kind of took a step back for the past 6 to 8 months, and yeah, now we're going to start to kind of pick it up, and we've got a race tomorrow for the next level endurance series at Watkins Glen in the LMP2 car, so looking forward to that. I'm actually driving in that one, so that's a bit of a rarity. I don't drive as much for myself, but I do get involved with the prototype cars.
I was going to ask that actually. Is it a case of you sort of just get involved with the admin of the team and you sort of find championships, or is it a case of you jump in sometimes just to have a bit of fun, or are you one of the sort of serious drivers? What's your sort of role, I guess, in terms of the driver's seat, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I like to see myself more as an admin side. I don't consider myself one of the fast drivers in the team, but I do like to drive a prototype car. I'm not a GT driver. I've never seen myself being fast in any GT car, but in prototype, there's something about high downforce cars that really suits my driving style. So yeah, give me a prototype car any day of the week or an F1 car, and yeah, I'll be on track.
Yeah, it looks like your teammates are actually going side by side yet again, though. They're not done fighting each other, and Ed Lack trying to throw around the outside of Neil Andrews. Alex Everett and Matt Acton as well going nicely side by side. And this is what happens, isn't it, on a slightly longer race? We sort of sit around twiddling our thumbs for 10 minutes, and all of a sudden there's 3 or 4 little battles. But you guys don't employ team tactics, do you, in the later rounds here? We've seen it maybe when we went to Monza and stuff like that, trying to get all 4 drivers to come in the top 4 places. But they're actually fighting each other now, aren't they?
Yeah, so with this series, I mean, especially with this series, if you look at the numbers, we can't employ team tactics. You've got to race the race, and everyone should race against each other. If we employed team tactics, you could end up being 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it could reduce the numbers, and it wouldn't be good for anybody. So that type of team tactics you can't really deploy here. Everybody has to race against each other, and as you can see, the guys are just racing against each other.
Yeah, it's a kind of case that we need to have a picture-in-picture, because there's a massive fight between your 2 drivers, obviously, and then 4th and 5th in Everett and Acton. And it has to be said, I mean, obviously you guys have come in and you've made major waves, haven't you, in this series, really? You come in and you just started to storm it, which is brilliant, because it's actually lifted the class of the rest of the field as well, and they've put some more times in it. You've brought in people like Everett, and Acton's up to his game, and James Holman, who's unfortunately not with us tonight, and stuff like that. And was it a case of just, you got Hodges in, and he was like, look, I'm racing in this league, does anybody want to join me? Or is it an active move to sort of maybe try and get involved with the next gen crew?
Well, it was, so when we took Matt on board, it was a case of he mentioned that he'd obviously just started racing in the series, They were looking for a few new drivers. We're looking to obviously progress with Matt and see how far we can take Matt as well. So if we can all jump into the same series in a way, we can help progress each other. So it was more of a case of, yeah, see if we can get a few more guys on board. They're going to help with the setups. They're going to help with the practice. So I know all the guys have put hours worth of practice in just for this event. And that's what it takes, I guess, to run at the front.
Yeah, certainly. And, well, they're doing exactly that. Obviously, give us your review on that race one, because that was slightly less efficient than you're probably used to seeing your drivers racing, wasn't it? You had about 3 different people leading the way at one point. Aaron Taylor ended up with I'm going to guess a drive-through or wrong setup. I'm not entirely sure. Ed Lack ended up spinning. And then, obviously, Neil Andrews ended up fighting with Matt Hodges and ended up in 4th place in the end.
Yeah, so I know that Aaron, unfortunately, may have loaded the wrong setup. We've all been there. We've all been there.
I've done that.
So yeah, unfortunately, that's why he had to take on the actual race fuel that he needed. Ed again, he lifted over one of these, one of the sausage curbs that
Sleeping policeman style things.
Yeah, one of the sleeping policemen, and yeah, apparently when the car landed on the ground, it gripped the front, but obviously just threw the rear end around, so couldn't save it. I know that Neil absolutely enjoyed the battle that he was having with Alex, so it was a shame that it ended in a little bit of a spin for him, but I know he fully enjoyed the battle.
Well, I suppose that is what we come to sim racing for. And actually, just to touch a little bit on what you were talking about before, actually, because you said during the pandemic and everything, actually, that you guys slightly took less races on, if anything. You toned down the calendar, which is the exact opposite from pretty much everybody else I've spoken to since starting this. Was that just a case of just giving them some time, and what are you ramping it back up to now? What are the things in the future?
Yeah, so we found, especially with myself running the team and the other team principal, my work kind of ramped up. I do kind of online. Well, I do like events, and it's all obviously when you hit a pandemic and everything moves to online, everything ramps up and you just have no hours in the day. So I was running out of time. We had people losing their jobs, or not losing their jobs, but not like being able to work, etc. So it just became a bit too much for everybody, we felt. So we thought we'd take a step back from pressurizing everybody to do the weekend iRacing events and also some of the bigger special events, because sometimes you just need to get some of the fun back to your racing before you can actually start to progress again. So we just took a step back for a few months, and then we'll see what we do for the rest of 2021. And hopefully it's a good rest of the year for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully real life starts getting back to normal and people get into more of a routine, and we can settle back down to actually planning out our weekends and our months and everything like that, because ultimately real life comes over everything else, doesn't it? And people need to spend time with their families and whatnot, and that's exactly what you guys are doing, which I admire you for. So I suppose moving forward then, have you got your eyes on any other championships that you guys are going to be entering, or endurance events? You mentioned the next level one tomorrow. Is there anything else sort of on the horizon, I suppose, for CXR?
We are still looking. I'm still trying to make a list of future competitions. So there are a few that we normally enter, but they're kind of a little bit on the gap at the moment. So yeah, we're on the horizon. So if you do know of any endurance series coming up, let me know, and we'll take a look at them and see what we can see whether we can enter at least one car into it.
Absolutely, yeah. I know. I mentioned it earlier in the stream when talking about Alex Everett and the Sim Racers World. They host lots of different endurance events, so on iRacing as well. So I'll be sure to ping over some information to you and anybody else as well who wants to get involved with some endurance racing, especially team-based events. CXR would definitely be a good force to have on those calendars. Interesting as well that you mentioned that a few of the drivers obviously stepping back, allowing your drivers to step back and sort of get the enjoyment of racing back. There was a lot of interviews around the British Touring Car Championship, and which I don't know if you follow, but you probably heard of, at least. Yep. And Jason Plato, obviously, he's back this year after having a year off, and the Power Max Racing actually had a full year off, and he's been saying exactly the same. It's like he's been jumped back in. It's like he's a kid again. He's not just going through the motions of, every year I'm jumping in the car. He's been doing it for 30 years or however long he's been doing it. He actually took that season out, and if anything, he hated it. He wanted to get back in the car more than ever, and all of a sudden you see a new Jason Plato. Is that what you've seen with your drivers a little bit as well? That desire?
That is exactly it. I took a long time out. I've not done very many official races myself for a long, at least 6 months. And yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like now I'm itching to get back in the car, and I actually want to go driving again. I think sometimes if you just give yourself that little bit of a break, it really gives you it gets you a mind reset. It gets your mind reset to actually go and focus on driving forward. So I'm looking forward to the next year and seeing whether I can progress myself as well. Like I never thought that I'd want to progress in some racing. It was just a little bit of fun at the start, but now, yeah, you kind of, especially on iRacing, you feel always like you want to progress. It's not like you're meeting new people all the time whenever you're racing online. So you don't always feel like you're competing against the same people. So it drives that kind of progression in you.
I bet you end up getting a sort of a knowledge of people's names, though, don't you? People you always seem to come across, especially if you're sort of in the similar echelon of tiers, say in the endurance events. You may end up in the same server as a lot of other people a lot of the time.
No, 100%. And yeah, you remember some names. You remember some names for the wrong reasons, but that's just part and part of racing. Unfortunately, that's some of the worst things about racing is when you have an incident with somebody and it is either your fault or it's their fault, and tempers flare and you say the wrong things. You look back on it the next day and realistically it was just a racing incident. And yeah, those are some of the worst parts about sim racing, but that's why we all do. Everybody flares up because they actually like it and they love it. So.
Well, without that passion, there'd be no point doing it, would there? So that's the reason, like you said, we all jump in. Is there any something I wanted to ask actually? Is there any sort of real life elements to any of your drivers? Have there been any experiences in real life racing, or with you indeed, or anything like that?
We do have a few drivers who do some real life racing. Let me think. We've got Jack the Clifford, who races in the Turbo Tin Tops British Championship. I think
I've commentated
that was what it was. Okay, well, yeah, he's one of our drivers. So
did he join about the same time as Matt Hodges?
Yeah, I think he might have been in this league at the very start.
Yeah, Solar Sim Racing.
Yeah. I know he also joined CXR Project Black, but unfortunately he's not had the time to actually join the rest of the season due to work commitments. So, but yeah, he does some driving. We've also got a guy over in the US as well who does like buggy racing, where they jump. It's like dirt buggy racing. That looks absolutely amazing fun. I
like
would
June
love to go over there and have it. Yes. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'll have to show you some videos. It's it's so good.
Yeah, I've actually been in one of those sort of dune buggy style dirt buggy things. I tested over in Spain, and we got there, flew all the way to Spain, drove the cars over there and everything, and the circuit was closed on one of the days we booked it, and no one was around to open it, which is brilliant. So somebody just lent us these dune buggies, and they were absolutely fantastic fun, aren't they? Really high powered, but they just take any terrain.
Yeah, I would love to have a go. Maybe at some point.
They're terrifying, though. You had to be warned for that. They're terrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can fully imagine.
Yeah, so you do have a plethora of drivers who have real-world experience as well. So you find that sort of helps them convert that over to sim racing, because I've driven real life myself, and I cannot get to grips with sim. I mean, I was a little like you. I've taken about a year out of actually driving to just shout at my monitor as Aaron Taylor goes a little bit wide there. There's a little bit touch and go, pushing a bit hard there. And all of a sudden I was like, had a big desire to jump back in and actually try and race myself. And I did about 3 rounds of a Tuesday night series, and found the reason why I don't do it anymore. It's because I'm awful. But do you find that real life race experience for your drivers actually sort of entails into good sim racecraft?
I mean, yeah, definitely into the racecraft. Yeah, definitely into the racecraft. But I mean, sim racing the same. Is I've done a bit of karting in my time. I've never raced any cars though. But I've heard so many drivers, so many real life drivers talking about how sim racing is just that much different, just because you don't get that seat of pants feel. And I would get that coming from the karting, but I don't know, the wheels that you can get these days, I would say, are that good that you can almost translate quite a lot of that. But I mean, I don't know, because I've never actually fully driven in a full race car, so it's difficult to say. But
I was going to say, I think it depends. If you're a driver that is very meticulous, knows exactly,
Yes.
like really works on the brake points, the travel, the speed,
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing, it can translate. I think if you're relatively instinctive of grip, I think it can be a real
Yes.
struggle, because the grip is a lot
Yeah.
different the way you feel it, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. When you're braking on a sim rig, you can feel the brake coming through the actual forces of the wheel. But obviously you don't have that when you're sliding around a corner on all 4 wheels. You have no sensation of that actually happening. So it is interesting, the differences, and it is interesting to see that you've got so many real life drivers. There's a real life driver in this, wasn't there, James? Was it James Holman?
Yes, I believe James is a real life driver, and he's a very quick one as well, from what I can see on the sim.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting to see how it actually does translate, and it's interesting to see how many drivers jumped on in the past year during the pandemic, and all got involved. The V8 Supercar series that they ran almost at the start of the pandemic was amazing to watch. Like, it was by far my favorite series to watch, like in terms of the professional kind of side of things.
Yeah.
To get the whole of the broadcasting involved, to actually do all the overlays and the whole broadcasting side, to do all the in studio stuff, was great to see them just translate it from the real life to digital, and also get like Lando Norris involved, etc. So
I was going to say, really, I suppose that's probably a good conversation topic to sort of, I suppose, end the chat that we're having, because we're already 10 minutes from the end, which is this has flown by. I mean, there's not been that much action on circuit since we've been chatting, so it's been really nice to have this chat. But I suppose if you've been around sim racing for like 8 years now, I mean, I was heavily involved in real life racing, and I just, jumped on with my mates every so often up until about a year ago. What's it been like? What's the boom of popularity and professionalism in sim racing that has happened because of, unfortunately, the pandemic? But has it been a drastic change from what you've seen? And do you think it's sustainable? Do you think people will continue to put that much effort into the E-Series?
I do think it's sustainable. From what I've seen over the last 8 years of just racing around on a controller, sat on my sofa, to now sat on what pretty much I could probably throw into an actual car in terms of costs, it's quite dramatic. And when you see how many other people are actually putting the amount of effort into their sim racing, I do see it as a sustainable thing going forward. And you even still see some of the drivers who are now going back to actually real life driving, they're still coming back to sim racing. So as long as that still happens, and they kind of do a mixture of the both, there's no reason why two can't simultaneously compete.
Yeah,
or coexist.
I was going to say, because, I mean, realistically, there was a lot of fuss, wasn't there, about especially the F1, the sort of the highest echelon, shall we say, in terms of motorsport marketing is F1. I think everybody can pretty much agree with that one. But it's whether or not it's the highest standard of racing is a completely different argument, but it is definitely the most marketable. And they obviously had everything cancelled, didn't they? And all of a sudden Sky was like, oh, we've paid all this money, we need something. And they decided to put the F1 E-Series on. But that came with a massive controversial sort of twist on it, didn't it? Because you had the likes of Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Alex Albon, but then they were also chucked onto the grid with people like Thibaut Courtois, the Real Madrid goalkeeper, and Sergio Aguero, the Man City striker, and Johnny Bairstow, the England cricketer, and stuff like that. And it became a bit of almost like a bit of a joke, and they didn't really know what it was going to be, did they? But I think other series like the V8 supercars that you mentioned and stuff like that, I think they really, there's a place where they can coexist with racing. So the F1, they tried to replace real life racing with the esports, and it just didn't sit well with people. But I think if you treat it as two different things, the F1 esports leagues, the high end esports stuff that they do, plus the F1 real life stuff, I think there's an opportunity for that.
That is exactly the thing with the F1. I tuned into the first one and I just didn't get it. I was like, no. I feel like we're trying to replace the F1 season that everybody loves, and we're now going to miss it. And they replaced it with what felt like a show or an entertainment thing, and that wasn't what I don't think people were waiting for. They were waiting for every single one of the drivers, including Lewis Hamilton, Bottas, the lot, to all take part in something, and that could be done from home. So when it didn't happen, that was a bit of a shame. And yeah, like the V8 supercars, they got that, they took it on board. They did invite some other drivers as well, but they were all professional drivers, so it retained its professionalism.
Yeah,
which I think is what F1 lost at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say, because then they actually you only watched the first one. It's the only one that was even half worth watching. After that, they went on to hot laps and stuff like that, like a hot lap championship, and it was like, what on earth is this? They're not even racing against each other. Anyway, that's a rant for another day, isn't it? But I have to say, it's probably there's only 5 minutes left of this race. Phil, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for jumping on and chatting to us. We've treated it almost like a podcast style thing, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it, so hopefully everybody else has as well. Is there anybody you'd like to give a quick shout out to before we let you go? Maybe enjoy the fact that you're probably going to get a 1, 2, 3, as long as Ed Lack doesn't try and launch one at the inside of Andrews. No,
just all the boys in CXR, absolutely stellar lads. It was great to just be in chat with them. Also give a shout out to our sponsor alcontech.com. Awesome pedals if anyone wants to check them out. That's about it, really. Cheers, Jack.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. I'll move you into the interview waiting, but it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and hopefully we'll have another chat another day.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
And that was Phil McDougall joining us for the best part of about 20 minutes there. 25 minutes has been delight, and there's actually the time has flown by, meaning there is only about 5 minutes left of the race. And do let me know if you actually enjoyed that style of sort of broadcast, because it is something that is slightly different. Obviously, I've done quite a few championships where we've done solo broadcasting and solo commentary, which is fine, but as we saw, it was good at the beginning. The PMR E series, which is what I actually started with this time last year, that was broadcast by me and my friend, because I couldn't work the broadcasting software very well, and whilst trying to commentate as well, because I've never done commentary before. But ever since then, we've done at least one sort of these style solo commentary things. And when you have the 45-minute feature races and stuff like that, it does drag on a bit. I don't think anybody who's watched this entire series hasn't said that every single one of the 45-minute feature races has been thrilling. Some of them have, Monza especially. But it means we have to try and maybe evolve the way we do the commentary and the way we do the broadcast. So I really do hope that you've enjoyed it. And NJ Stock, thank you very much for the subscription on YouTube as well. And I think Mark Sykes, I missed your like as well on Facebook. So on that sort of theme, I suppose, just before we go into the final knockings of this race, we will just focus, I tell you what, on Miles Owens, because we haven't really focused back too much at all, because obviously we're focusing on CXR crew really. But what I've decided to do is essentially I am starting a podcast of sorts. And we've got some really good guests lined up. I don't want to tell you the order because I haven't got the order lined up, but there is a good interest, and sort of everybody has said that they will do it. So it's my friend and me, my friend Chaz Draycott from Sim Racers World. Ironically, they're getting a lot of plugs tonight. Chaz and me are going to be doing a podcast style thing, which we're going to be trying to record every Tuesday and hopefully coming out on the weekend, if not slightly before. Miles Owens just ruining my announcement for my podcast as he was trying to maybe nudge Nigel Stock out of the way, who held his ground really rather well there, though. And Miles gets a big kick of the rear end out as he was coming through the final corner. It's going to be a drag race down to the first corner. It looks like Miles should have it quite easily done, but you can tell they're very much avoiding each other now, aren't they? Definitely don't want to cause any more incident. I'll tell you what, if they're not running VR or triple monitors, I can absolutely appreciate where they're coming from, because as a single monitor driver myself, it is very difficult. When Miles Owens hits the curb and there is going to be contact. No, Nigel just comes out of it. He's going to have the position back though as Miles ends up. Tell you what, they're giving it a lot of room, aren't they? A lot of racing respect has to be said there. All of a sudden, Miles has to do it all again. But yeah, we are going to be doing a podcast. We're going to be recording it every Tuesday, starting this Tuesday. It should have been last Tuesday. But unfortunately, our guest had to go down and do some driver coaching, which is all fair enough. And then it'll be coming out on the weekends. Hopefully, it's going to be based around British touring cars, but British motorsport and sim racing in general, as me and Chaz are both sim racing commentators, and he does a lot of real life stuff as well, which hopefully I will one day. And it's going to be the... oh my god, what's it going to be called? Boring talk concerning cars. And if you're wondering why on earth it's called that, abbreviate it and you'd probably understand. But boring talk concerning cars will hopefully start either this weekend or the weekend after. And the sort of guests that we've got lined up for it, if you want to sort of whet your appetite a little bit, we got Bobby Thompson's going to be our first guest. That's who we got on Tuesday. That is confirmed. Creasy's going to be coming in. Dan Camish has agreed to come on as well. I've messaged Max Coates. He said he's up for it as well in a couple of weeks' time. As Nigel Stock and Miles Owens still going at it. We must be on to the final lap of the race by now. I think Aaron Taylor may well actually get one more. This may well be the penultimate lap. But yeah, Max Coates is probably going to be coming on. As I said, Creasy. Who else have I added on to it? There's a few drivers that I mean to keep. Oh, Rick Parfitt. He's going to be coming on in about 3 weeks as well. So there should be a real plethora of fantastic people to be joining in. It's going to be a little bit of fun. It's not necessarily going to be a full-on interview-style normal podcast that a lot of people have tried to do before. We're going to try and spice things up a little bit and enjoy it as well, and get our guests sort of having some fun and playing some games, and also maybe even trying their eye a little bit of commentary as well, which I think Michael Crease will certainly be very interested in and very good at, I imagine, as well. So that'll be getting released both on my channel and Chaz Draycott's channel. That's Chaz Draycott Media. Again, a little plug for someone else. But that's going to be getting released on there. Hopefully, it should be good fun if it all comes together. It's a little bit complicated. We've never done a podcast before, but hopefully it all comes together. And just to focus on the top, two of the top three, because I think, well, we are on to the final lap of the race. Ed Lack is really starting to pile the pressure onto Neil Andrews. We've given Nigel Stock and Owens plenty of time to try and sort that battle out between each other, but we have to now shoot to the top two. Oh, sorry, two of the top three. As Ed Lack starts to lag in and out of existence. Must be very difficult for him to be pushing as hard as he is on all the series that he's been racing with CXR if he's got that sort of laggy internet, but it could just be a one-off, to be fair. If you did like the interview with Phil McDougall, then please do let me know. As I said, or give a like on the stream, or go and follow CXR Project Black and all that sort of thing, and keep up to date with what they've got going on. By the sounds of it, they're starting to ramp things up, and it's always nice to hear about team successes and what they've got planned as well, and how they came about always interests me anyway. We're going to have to focus on Aaron Taylor because this is the last lap of the race. It's going to be his victory. And I think this keeps the championship alive just for one more week, potentially. In fact, yeah, Matt Hodges is in 5th place at the moment. So Aaron Taylor takes the checkered flag here for round 16 of the GRID Engineering GTE Series 1 here at Imola. Neil Andrews stays ahead, by the looks of it, of Edward Lack. Basically a race-long battle that we've seen from those guys. Nigel Stock and Miles Owens are the drivers we're actually going to go back and focus on, just to see how they've dealt with themselves. And it looks like that Nigel Stock is actually just fallen behind Miles now. So after all that, Miles Owens passed him finally. And in fact, this is how it happened. Going into the penultimate corner, it's Stock on the inside. Owens was trying to fly around the outside. Didn't quite have it done, but I think he's going to line up a move into the first corner potentially. Let's have a quick gander. Yeah, going around the outside of the first corner. A brave move there by Owens. but it is a good move, it has to be said as well. Nice, clean, and almost Verstappen-esque. And as these guys are starting to finish, they've got about a quarter of the lap to go, or basically 2 corners, and a very, very long straight. It will be, by the looks of it, the rounding out the top 5, Matt Acton and Matt Hodges. Alex Everett ended up coming in 6th in the end, about 5 seconds back from Hodges, who did gain another position. And in fact, we'll be able to see how, actually. It really was not that much ended up in that race while we were chatting to Phil. There's about a 20-minute gap where literally my highlights reel is 0. And as the final drivers come across the line, we will just have a look at that move on Hodges for Alex Everett, which was the last moves that we saw apart from... Oh, it's because Alex Everett went wide. So this is how it happened, and Everett just, a little bit too much curb on the outside and ended up spinning off. That's how he ended up, I think, losing 1, maybe 2 positions. So let's bring you the race results then for race number 2 here. Aaron Taylor took the CXR victory, also took the race victory as well. The 2 go hand in hand so many times. Neil Andrews took 2nd place. Ed Lack came in 3rd. Matt Acton saw this TCE car coming in 4th place. Matthew Hodges was in 5th. Alex Everett in 6th. Miles Owens in 7th. Nigel Stock 8th after a good battle at the end there with Miles Owens, to be fair. George Bland ended up 2 laps down, but worse off was Matt Emmons, who ended up 21 laps down after starting on pole position. And I know full well that he's extremely disappointed with himself. But head up, Matt. There's always next week. And I believe, we do have one driver to bring into the interview room. He's a driver that quite often likes to come and have a chat with us, and it is Alex Everett. Alex, how the devil are you?
Not too bad, Jack. How the devil are you?
I am not bad in the slightest. Yeah, it was a good race 1, wasn't it? Very entertaining. Unfortunately, I can't bring up the highlights for your personal race for race 1, as you know, but the race 2 didn't quite go your way.
Sadly not. It was looking good in places where I had the pace to get up and battle towards 2nd place. I mean, Aaron was just gone. There was no one stopping him. But I could have caught Neil and Edward, but just not meant to be. Too many mistakes here and there. But I'm very pleased with my pace tonight and feel like I can carry that into the final 2 rounds of the season.
Yeah, you look like you've almost taken the role of James Holman and actually being the driver to probably upset the apple cart here with the CXR drivers. Talk us through that race for race 1, because it was quite sensational, the actual action that you had with Neil Andrews, wasn't it? It was properly full on.
Start of the race, not a very good start with the unawareness of it being a standing start. Never mind, move on. But a couple of drivers just dropping out in front of us. But for the rest of the race, it was just an intense battle with Neil. There were opportunities where I managed to get alongside, and it didn't quite happen due to contact and things like that. But a good battle in the end. Managed to get in front with about, I think it was 3 laps to go or something like that, and knew I could just pull away. And I think it might have forced Neil into a little bit of a mistake. But I feel like a 2nd was probably the ideal results. The back of my mind's thinking we could have really been up there battling for 1st, but still pleased with the podium.
I was going to say, realistically, I think the CXR drivers were actually dropping you a touch, weren't they? But then they started fighting amongst themselves. And at that point, you must have thought, I'll tell you what, I'm in it. There's an opportunity to get in the slipstream. And then, because once you lose the slipstream here at Imola, sorry, not Monza. Well, it applies for Monza as well. But you really are screwed, aren't you? There's no chance at catching someone up if you're not in their slipstream.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I noticed, we all noticed it here, that as soon as 2 cars start battling through corners such as Tamburello and Variante Alta, it allowed the car behind to just pull up to them with almost a second up to them. And then it was game on, and that's what I got, thankfully. But yeah, this track, probably more so than most, and actually you mentioned Monza, it's a bit like that as well. But this track more so than most, where you start battling, you're going to be risking being caught by the person behind.
You are indeed, yeah. Well, just before we let you go, Alex, obviously to enjoy that 2nd place, maybe not so much the sixth place that you probably. Well, actually, I'll tell you what. One last question: what happened at the end there? We did show a replay of it. Did you just lose it on the exit of one of the chicanes?
Yeah, I got my personal best on the lap before, and I thought, come on, Alex, we can do this. We can catch them. And I just pushed it too hard through turn 2, I think it was, and yeah, just hit a little bit of the grass. And you know, with these cars, once you get any like a centimeter of the tire on the grass or gravel, that's it. It's gone. And it was just a case of that for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it is the case sometimes, isn't it? But it is what it is. Hopefully, next week you'll carry the momentum forward. Is there anybody you'd like to give a quick shout out to before we let you? Actually, no. Sorry, one last question. Actually, how is the Legends going on a Wednesday night? Because obviously we're part of the Next Gen season here. We might as well get a little bit of an update, considering you broadcast that one as well.
Oh, I tell you what, it's absolutely brilliant to watch. I'll be honest, and I said this to Jamie. I was a little bit apprehensive going into being a commentator on that series because the Legends aren't the most popular of cars. We all know, and I kind of thought, is this gonna work? And you know what? Right from race 1, I thought, oh my, this is good, real good. It's such an exciting series to watch, even when there's slightly less drivers on the grid like there was last week, unfortunately. But when it's got 12 drivers or 25 drivers, it is incredible, that series. But 2 rounds to go. It's very exciting, particularly for the championship battle between Bobby Thompson and Mikey Doble, 2 professional racing drivers, by the way. But yeah, it's great the Next Gen have not 1 but 2 brilliant iRacing leagues on the go at the moment.
Yeah, hopefully they're both sort of here to stay, whether it or not they change formula slightly. I think there's rumours of this one changing formula, but hopefully the Legend stays the same because it is brilliant to watch. Alex, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to before we let you go?
Yeah, thanks to Next Gen as always, putting on some great leagues. Thank you to you, Jack, for putting on a great show as usual. And thank you to Matt Emmons for putting on this league. I really enjoy it, and I hope I can do more rounds in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. Echo the sentiments towards everybody apart from the compliments towards me, obviously. But we'll let you go, Alex. Thank you very much for jumping in, and congrats on the 2nd place.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks everyone for watching.
And that was Alex Everett jumping in to have a quick chat with us. There is no other drivers here this evening, so what we're going to do is say goodnight. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, everybody who's Phil McDougall for coming in for the chat as well, which made the 45-minute race fly by. Alex Everett as well for coming into the interview, and obviously all you guys for watching, liking, following. Don Kaza has come on to follow as well on the stream, so thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can follow Jacko Racing on whether you're watching YouTube or Facebook, or subscribe, follow, do whatever you want to do. I'm not in charge of you, as I always say, but make sure you're here next Friday for more GTE action. We've got about 2 rounds to go, I believe, and we'll be probably crowning a champion next week, to be honest, unless Aaron Taylor can really pull something out of the bag and Matt Hodges maybe doesn't get so lucky.